All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the Asking for a Friend podcast, where we are answering your questions on biblical marriage, relationships, parenting, all the things. So my name is William. This is my wife, Jul. Thank you guys for jumping in. How's it going?
We're excited. It's good. Yeah, we've had great feedback from the first week. So we're excited and want to keep answering questions best that we can and jump right into it.
Awesome. Yeah, we got a whole new slew of questions. So why don't we go ahead and jump in?
Sure. So the first question we got this week is, does God tell you who to marry? AKA, does he tell you that this is the one? And how can you be certain?
Great question.
Big question.
I'll start it out with this. I don't believe that there is one person that is perfect for everyone, right? I believe that at the same time, outside of making this decision to follow Jesus, who you're going to marry is the most important decision you're going to make outside of following Jesus, right?
Sure.
So, I think knowing that there are two imperfect people that are coming together, that are entering into this covenant, that are deciding to do life together, right? Ben has recently said this. He said, when it comes to who you're going to marry and the fact you're going to have a family and have kids, think of, who do I want to enter into a 20-year group project with of raising kids, of starting this family, right? So it's a massive decision. So I'd say, no, there is not the one, but there is a lot of wise counsel that needs to happen, a lot of wise decisions that need to be made before you just kind of jump into it.
Yeah. So we talked about this, there's a lot of guiding principles to answer this question because, right, it's not, this is the one. And, there's a lot of uncertainty with that. So for us, and, the foundation of the information that we're talking about and sharing is we want to help you and help others and for ourselves, give you advice for a lasting marriage, right? Not a 5-year marriage, not a 10-year plan, 20-year plan, but a marriage that's going to last.
Yeah.
So with that, some things we kind of thought about with this question was, generally speaking, it probably takes 6 months or so to really get to know a person.
At least, yeah.
At least. And that's true of any person. That's true of a new boss, a new employee, a new friend to your friend group, any type of relationship. Generally 6 months, that's not a magic number. But the idea behind that is you have to go through life enough with somebody to see, how do they handle the ups? How do they handle the downs?
Yeah.
How do they react in tough, stressful situations? And building a relationship on that. So generally speaking, it's a good guiding principle to say when you're, pursuing somebody, dating somebody, that type of thing, 6 months as a time frame.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's important because, there's this principle that I learned years ago, and it's for each of us as humans. Like we are made. We are not just who we physically are, right? There's a whole bunch of elements that make up who we are. It's the physical, it's the intellectual, it's emotional, social, and spiritual, right? And if you're thinking about somebody that you're going to marry, like there needs to be a connection on all 5 of those levels, right? So am I physically attracted to you? Okay, that's typically where you kind of start, right? And next, intellectually, are we on the same page? Like, can we have the same types of conversations? Are we tracking on the same things? Emotionally, are we emotionally connected? Do you emotionally understand each other? Socially, do we enjoy the same things?
Sure.
Do we want to, be around bigger groups of people? Are we introverted? Or do we like going to sporting events together? Or whatever the case is, right? And then, of course, spiritually, like, are we spiritually on the same page? That is the foundation of your relationship, right? Are we both believers? But that's just the first layer, right?
Yeah.
Like for us, when we were dating, a big part of it was, hey, I knew that I felt called to ministry early on. Yeah. And so when we were dating, it was a lot of conversations like, hey, Sundays will look different. Like, are you going to be okay with that? If I get called somewhere else, are we going to be okay moving somewhere, whatever the case is? So it's knowing over time, that takes time, right? How you respond emotionally to certain situations, how I respond socially to different things. Being able to fully connect and know somebody on all of those levels just takes time.
Absolutely. And I think the ability to be comfortable enough with that person, to have enough time spent so that you are clear on your goals, your hopes and dreams and your expectations. Like William said, we had those conversations, leading up to getting engaged, leading up to certainly getting married, about, hey, what is our life together going to look like? Is that just your goal, or is that our goal? You know, is that your expectation, but not my expectation? So using that time, to figure out if they're the one, but the one that those things align with, those 5 things that you talked about, being on the similar page and having those conversations around those to make sure and give you some certainty with that.
100%. My dad always said, when you're looking for a spouse, right, you are in line seeking after Jesus, right? And you're that woman that eventually you'll marry, you're in line seeking after Jesus and what you're supposed to do. And if it's meant to be, you're going to end up crossing paths, and you're going to both head in the same direction, right? So it sounds crazy, but like having those conversations, hey, what do you want out of a family? What do you want out of your career? All those different things that you can talk about early on, because like I said, this is the biggest decision of your life. Mm-hmm. So don't compromise what you feel like God's calling you to do just for the sake of wanting to be married. Mm-hmm. And I'll say this, it was really, for us, we dated long distance for 2 years. I was in California at Bible college. You were here in nursing school. We had, if you didn't know, we had met in high school. And so we were friends and then started dating long distance. And when I was in California and you were here, I was pretty confident, okay, I'm going to marry this girl, right? But it was really important to me that let's live in the same town and let's experience life together.
Sure.
Let's experience those normal rhythms of what life is like, right? Because up until then, our dating experience, everything was an event.
Right.
If we got to go to church together, it was an event. If we, got to go on a date, it was this, massive event. What does that look like? What do those rhythms look like when we go to church every week together, when we serve in youth group every week together, when we, have regular dates. You just go to school, you go to jobs, and it's just like your normal rhythms, because it's so important to experience that as well.
Sure. Great answer. Okay. Question number 2. What are your key tips or some key tips for engaged couples as they prepare for marriage?
So I'd start with this, and I think this is very important. In God's eyes, you are single or you are married. There is no in between. So engagement can be, and we're talking as a Christian, right? As a Christian, engagement can be such an awkward time, because it's like and a tempting time, to be honest, because man, we have been dating and we have made this decision that we are going to get married. And now we're entering this period where, guess what? You're still single and you're not married yet. And the temptation in that is to, let's start acting like we're married. Mm-hmm. And so what I mean by that is, hey, unpopular opinion, don't live together. Don't live together. Don't move into a house together and start acting like you're married, right? Don't start having premarital sex, because all of a sudden, well, we're going to get married. Well, what's the point of waiting? What ends up happening? The reason this is such a big deal is because you are compromising. You're compromising your decisions. You're compromising your convictions, all because, for the sake of what? Comfort, for the sake of, immediate needs or whatever the case is, but you're allowing compromise to come into your relationship. And I'll tell you that, whatever you start then is just going to trickle in.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's something we get asked a lot, and people, deal with a lot. And I think, culture has a big influence, and it's very normal now for, dating couples, engaged couples to live together and things like that. But we know as believers, it looks different for us,
Sure.
And our convictions, like you said, are different.
Yeah.
And so don't start off compromising and start off at a place that, and sure, on the surface, it's like, oh, there's reasons. It's more convenient. It's cheaper. It's this. We're going to, we get married in 2 months. You can fill in any excuse
Sure.
that you want. And we know this is a hard topic and something that a lot of people deal with, but it's also that important. And again, we are sharing advice on how to make a marriage that lasts.
Exactly.
That's not.
I'll say this, scripturally, the Bible tells us to flee sexual immorality. And that is something that, man, you have to learn to flee from when you're single and when you're living with roommates. You have to learn to flee from when you're dating. You have to learn to flee from when you're engaged, right? If I'm living with my future wife, am I truly fleeing sexual immorality?
Sure.
Right. And you still have to continue to flee sexual immorality when you're married, right?
Sure.
There's always temptations around you and what that looks like, right? So continuing to flee that. And again, you have this saying, and you'll say it better than I will because you say it all the time, the habits you start now are the habits that will continue throughout your marriage.
Yep.
Right? Isn't that what you put it?
I usually say, the things that you start in your first year of marriage, those habits that you form are the ones, good, bad, ugly. Those are the habits that will stick around.
Yep.
So,
and I'd say what you compromise before you get married is you're going to continue to allow to compromise when you're married.
Sure. And it makes
Lord can redeem, Lord can work.
He does.
In your heart 100%, but let's go ahead and start working on that now.
Right. Exactly right. So another piece of advice we'd say for engaged couples, that I think sometimes gets dismissed a lot of times, or not as much value is put on this anymore, but premarital counseling. And that can look different for everybody. Sometimes you would live apart, so doing things online, whatever, but some type of premarital
100%.
counseling, when you meet with a couple that is older and wiser and has been through it and can give you real life advice and challenge you both with questions. And we did that sitting down, preparing for our marriage. And it was tough. It's some of the questions you don't really want to ask and you don't really want to think through. And other things you're like, oh, we have that figured out. We're pros at that, right?
You think you are.
You think you are. But it was so valuable. The couple that counseled us, we still have a lasting relationship with them. We still call them, 15 years, 16 years down the road.
Yeah.
And you cannot put a price tag on that. So absolutely finding a couple, finding somebody that will go through that with you, that will challenge you with those things. We have had the opportunity and privilege to do that with many couples along the years, and ask those questions and go through those things. And it is incredibly helpful to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Talking through finances, talking through family, talking through, decision making, all of those different things,
Sure.
right? And it's so much different than let me read a book, let me listen to a podcast, let me listen to a sermon. All great resources.
Sure.
Nothing beats having the wise counsel of somebody else that's, kind of like we talked about last year, 10, 15, 20, 40, 50 years ahead of you.
Right.
And that has the wisdom and that can sit down and say, okay, but let me ask you this. Why that? Why this?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So
Right.
That's great. Yeah, no, we offer premarital counseling at the church. We have couples that are set up for that. And shout out to my parents who do a lot of it, who've been married for 40 plus years.
Thank you, Hope and Jay.
Yeah. All right, next question. How can you keep Christ at the center of your marriage? And I'll preface it with this.
Okay.
I'll before I want to get your thoughts, but I'll preface with this. Men, husbands, soon-to-be husbands, hopeful husbands, men, whoever you are, it starts with you. It starts with you. God has placed you, has designed you to be the leader of your household. And so take ownership, set the tone for your home. what the habits that you make, the decisions that you make set the tone for your home. So
Sure.
I'll start with that.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, this is one of those questions that get asked all the time. And what you have to acknowledge is that something will be the center of your marriage.
Yeah.
That could be your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
That could be your hobby,
Yep.
your career, your kids when you start having them. It is
Yep.
easy and honestly, you do it without thinking and just you get into these habits of those become the center, right?
Yeah.
It's where you spend your daily habits doing and spending your free time there and that type of thing. So in order to combat those things being the center and to keep Christ as the center of your marriage, you have to we have 15 years of learning this and failing, but improving on that is setting daily habits to make Christ the center, spending time in the Word every day. We do that, on our own, and we're by no means perfect. Praying together, obviously praying on your own, but praying with your spouse. All of those things, spending quality time when you do grow your family. I mean, all of those things directly keep Christ and make Christ the center. And it's easy. We talked about this last week you have to constantly reevaluate what does life look like, right? For us right now. Okay, we've been in this season. Okay, you've had, I'm in school, or your job has this deadline coming up, and those things can start to snowball easily be now they're the center.
Yep.
So you constantly have to reassess and reevaluate, but make those daily habits, create those daily habits, the good ones.
Sure.
Get rid of the bad ones to keep Christ as the center.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're dead on. I think the reality that there's an enemy out there that wants to destroy your family, that wants to remove Christ as the pillar, as the center of your home. So he will do what he can to do that, is the reality. And so if we have that mindset and we are acknowledging, okay, there's a real enemy out there that is really trying to destroy my home and my family. So let me be on guard for that. And so like what you said, different seasons bring different things, right? We're in a season right now where the kids, we have 3 boys, 2 of them are now in different sports. And the third one next year will be playing a sport too. And we're going to have 3 sports going at the same time, right? Sure. And it is so easy to fall into the trap of, oh man, we got to do this. They would love this. This is how we can love them, is by allowing them to do this or allowing them to do that or giving them the opportunity to do this. Sure. All those things are great. But at the end of the day, if Christ is the center, what non-negotiables do we need to have that we're going to build our family around? And we're going to make decisions for our family based on those non-negotiables.
Sure. And you'll hear us talk about non-negotiables a lot, but thinking about those, challenging yourself to say, what are the few things, no matter what, in our marriage to keep Christ as the center that we don't negotiate and we keep, whether that's, okay, every week, every Sunday, we're going to be at church together, whether that's a carved out amount of quality time and time you spend together and time you spend in the Word, doing other things, setting those up, setting your marriage up and eventually your family up for success.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hey, we are committed. We're going to go to church on Sundays, right? As a family. We're committed to, for us, currently we're in a season, hey, our Sunday afternoons are our family time, right? Where we're going to spend time with our family together, right? For, regular date nights for us, right? And I think it's important, Pastor Shannon had a sermon the other Sunday where he talked about 8 things of sacrificial love, right? And one of those was if I can't remember exactly, but I think it's undistracted quality time.
Yep.
Right.
Avoiding half-hearted
quality time. And so I think, when I talk about date nights and when I talk about quality time together, that's what I'm talking about. Avoid the half-hearted date night.
Absolutely.
Put your phone away, put the distractions away, have real life conversation about how you're feeling, what's going on at work, like what are you struggling with, what's frustrating, what are you jealous of, whatever the case is, right? Like have those real heartfelt conversations that lead to you pointing each other to Christ, and
the good things too, the highs. And not just the lows, but celebrating little wins
100%.
and big wins. And, William and I always try to make a point, on date nights and things, and to say, hey, like, what are some dreams you have? What is something you see yourself doing in the next year with, your job or what, trying to give each other that space to talk about those things too.
Challenge each other. Man, I see this gift.
Yes,
I see where you
yes.
can, yeah.
But that devoted quality time, that uninterrupted quality time is huge.
It's huge. And I'd say this, like, man, it doesn't always have to be this like $100 dinner, $200 dinner, fancy dinner that you go to that's date night, right? Like that can be as simple as, hey, Tuesday nights, we're not turning the TV on after the kids go to bed.
Sure.
We're going to go sit on the back porch. We're going to talk, put our phones away, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
Like it can be as simple as that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, last question for tonight. I have a couple more we're going to save for next week. Yeah. But for tonight, what would you say to a married couple who seems to bicker/fight often? I'll start with just saying it's common. If you're in that situation, don't think that something's wrong with you. Don't think that, man, I fight and nobody else fights. We bicker and nobody else bickers, or has ever gone through that struggle or been through that season, especially early on. You're learning to live together and you're making some life adjustments, and it can be a lot of butting heads in that, but, or you add kids into the equation, or careers change and seasons change, and those things can kind of flare up. So I'd say first, just know that. Yeah.
Yeah. And to chime in with that, knowing that that's common, but that also doesn't have to be your baseline. I think a lot of people get comfortable in the bickering space, the arguing, the back and forth, and that becomes like the norm.
Yep.
And it's like, well, we're just married. That's what you do, whether it's your first year,
we're the
you've been
grumpy
married,
old couple.
Yeah, 30 or whatever. It shouldn't be, right? Those of us who are parents, if you're in a season, you and a child bicker back and forth all the time, it's painful. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And it's like that. I mean, it's like that in your marriage. It can be like that in your marriage. So don't let it be your baseline. I love that, this question was asked so that, we don't want that to be our normal. We don't want that to be the thing. I think for us, as we process this question, is identifying and understanding that there is a root cause. I think for us, this has happened, and I think for others as well, starts out jokingly, right? Starts out in sarcasm. And, and it's this, poking fun at each other, or, always joking or being sarcastic about a certain thing or whatever. But when you really talk about it, it comes down to some kind of root cause.
Sure.
Something that is kind of feeding that bicker, that argument, that sarcasm. So it is very important to have that conversation, like William talked about. Make that space, not in the heat of the argument. That's not the time. Let the argument go away, fizzle out. Let the emotions come down. But in a calm way, in a time, the right space is to sit down and talk about it and say, wow, this is something that is happening often. Yeah. This is something that I've seen. And I want to understand why this is happening, and talk with each other. And then you kind of have that safe space to talk through it. It could be situational, right? It happens every day after work. And that's when one of you is triggered by something, or stressful events, then it always happens. Or it's, a subject matter, a topic matter, right? It's, you always make fun of, my mom or a family member or this or that. And, so kind of identifying that root cause, talking about what that is and where that's coming from. And it's not, it's hurtful to the other person and that type of thing, and being able to talk it out.
Yeah, totally. I think a big part of it is when you approach that conversation, because how you approach the conversation determines the outcome. I'll be honest, like a lot of I've gone into many conversations with you where I have lost the argument, I've lost the conversation before it's even started, because I've come in with an aggressive tone, I've come in with an accusatory tone, I have come in with no humility. So my biggest advice is when you actually take a moment to talk about it, come in with humility. There's two sides to every argument. There's two sides to every bickering. There's two sides to every, to that tension. And so take ownership of it. Come in with humility and say, hey, this is something that I've noticed I'm doing and I don't like it. And I don't really know why. What do you think? Mm-hmm. How have you seen that in me? When have you noticed that I've kind of done that? How have I, approached it that's been hurtful or been harmful, whatever the case is. And you're again coming with humility, and you're coming with vulnerability there that allows there to be a conversation, right?
And it's important, and it's okay to communicate the hurt behind it, right? 100%. There might be something, but in that constant bickering, in that constant argument, that is hurtful, a subject matter that is sensitive. And you need to be able to communicate that to each other and say, hey, when you joke about this, when you tease about, this is upsetting me. Yeah. And we need to figure out, and let's talk about.
You think it's funny.
Well, you think it's funny.
I don't think
it's funny. Right. And it's a thing, and let's talk about it and figure it out. And that really does lead to less bickering, because now you're taking out the assumptions and it's like I tell my kids, it's like, okay, well, now we've talked about it. So now it upsets me when you do it.
Yeah.
And that part's really important.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other side of that too is listen.
Sure.
Ask questions and listen to what your spouse is saying. We used to do this exercise early on. I thought it was really helpful, is when we're in an argument, when we're in a disagreement, and we're having a conversation about it, I would say something, and then you would repeat back. And you remember this?
Yes.
You would repeat back what I said. Mm-hmm. And the reason this is so important is because you're repeating back what you heard. So realizing what I said might not be what you heard.
Right.
And so there's a miscommunication here. And so it's such a simple tool that you're able to do, to sit there, look at each other. Don't say anything. Let me talk. Let me do all of. That's the hardest part. Let me do all of my talk. You just listen. Okay. Now you repeat back what you heard, not what I said, but what you heard.
Right.
Gosh, that's so helpful in just understanding where you're coming from and where the miscommunication would be. And so, yeah, that's important. Realizing those little comments, that sarcasm, that those little jabs that maybe with your roommate you thought were fun, or your sibling, and you guys went back and forth. Gosh, that's just not helpful. And it's actually very detrimental. It can snowball. And like you said, that can become the baseline, which is dangerous.
Sure.
And I'd say this, it is okay to ask for help, right? Mm-hmm. If maybe you try these things and man, we just cannot get past that, reach out to your pastor, reach out to, a mentor, reach out to the people that do your premarital counseling, reach out to a therapist, whatever the case is, so that you can have someone help you kind of work through some of those communication tools.
Absolutely. Because I think it's for, some people, right, you do try these things and you do try to have that conversation. That might be the hardest part, is just having that conversation. And even at that point, you can't get on the same page. So absolutely reach out and be able to get into a space where you can have that conversation, identify these causes that we're talking about and improve that for sure.
It reminds me of when we first got married, I think also how we communicate can also be a super big tension point. If you don't know, I come from a fairly quiet household. I mean, we weren't yellers. right? Like in our communication style, where you come from, your dad's from Connecticut, you had 5 siblings. Like it was a very, we're yelling. And I remember early on,
Baseline
like
yelling.
we would get in a disagreement and I'd be like, stop yelling. And
You
you're
are
like,
yelling. And
yeah, you're like, I'm not yelling.
Right.
And it's like, even just those simple things
Absolutely.
and working through that, gosh, is so important. All right. I think that's it for tonight.
Yes. Thank you guys for joining, for listening. We love your questions, so continue to send them in. And,
I didn't say text your questions in 94000. They're anonymous. We love to answer them. We just want to be a resource, a tool for our church and how we can best love and serve you guys.
Yes. Thank you guys.